It just occurred to me. ERA. Those are the first three letters of the word erasure. This is the ERAsure Amendment, and that's how I'm going to refer to it from now on, because that's what it does. It erases women. It erases unborn children. It doesn't just erase them physically. It erases them conceptually. It says, you aren't worthy of acknowledging as a concept. We're not even going to think about you. We're going to proceed as if you don't exist. That's what this amendment does.
The Hudson-Mekeland Podcast.
Let's talk about the ERA. So the deceptively named Equal Rights Amendment, which is coming to the House floor tomorrow as we record this Monday. We'll likely either be debating it or have debated it by the time this comes out.
Right.
I don't know. Top of the line thoughts, top of the mind thoughts on what's coming now.
I get an email from a constituent that doesn't necessarily agree with my politics. To which she said, Shane, this is her name, one of your constituents. I commend you on your newsletter for delineating the gun laws. It's very clear, and I appreciate it. However, it's kind of poorly written, but I don't agree that you voted against it. This was on the gun bills, anti-gun bills. But then it goes on to say, once again, I encourage you to support the ERA. I want you to know why. If you do not support that and do not support women, because this is the main thrust of this law. So
have you read it? Because it really isn't.
It really undermines women's rights.
Yes.
As we were just talking before we started, my daughter went to her first prom. She's a senior in high school. And this literally obliterates women's sports.
Yep.
Their privacy in a bathroom.
You got it.
And if you even say anything against it, that now you're committing an act against those that are going to be protected within it, because they took out the word sex and put in gender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I understand, how this particular constituent's looking at it, mm-hmm. or the lack thereof. But at the end of the day, if she has girls, particularly in a vulnerable age, mm-hmm. in the prime of their life, and I sat at the Grand March last night. I'm looking at all these young ladies, all dressed quite nicely, mm-hmm. some a little bit too nicely, but and you could tell the ones that were going with friends, mm-hmm. Just a guy friend, not boyfriend, girlfriend, mm-hmm. versus the ones that were truly probably have found their mate forever, or at least believe so.
Yeah, right.
And I'm looking at all this, and I'm thinking, why would we allow a male who chooses to say that he identifies otherwise, mm-hmm. into their locker room, mm-hmm. into their bathroom,
right?
And I find this for my daughter, she played sports, probably not the best at whichever one she tried. I mean, she was better than some, but not the top one by any means. But to take away those records, those trophies, those, you go into any high school auditorium gym, and they have all the records that they've ever achieved, or their students, and they could go back into the 70s or 60s, what have you. And now these boys are erasing all of that. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big hard no on the ERA.
It's the we see at the Capitol, we see women walking around carrying the green signs that look exactly the same as they did back in the 70s. And the branding of this thing is, this is your grandmother's ERA. This is the same thing that we've been fighting for as women for decades on end, to try to finally, even though we've got a female minority leader in the House, we've got a female speaker in the House, we've got a ton of women on both sides of the aisle. There's women in positions of power and authority everywhere.
What is our vice president?
Exactly. Right. Like, what is this? What are you even talking about? Like, this would be like me saying we need a bill to end segregation, to end Jim Crow. It's like, that's a done deal. Like, it's in the past. That is not a thing. So what are you even talking about? And then, of course, as you point out, it actually does the opposite. It categorically erases women. People need to understand. So, and this is something, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's going to certainly be part of my floor debate tomorrow. When they replace the word sex with the word gender, they know exactly what they are doing. They will tell you, and they have told you, that sex and gender are not the same thing. Gender is this nebulous idea of how you identify. That's why it's a spectrum, because it could be anything. Literally anything that you can imagine as your gender identity fits somewhere on the spectrum, and it's ever expansive. Sex is binary. You're either male or you're female. Even something like intersex is a reference to the binary inter, right?
Right. Intercourse.
Right, exactly. So by taking the word sex and replacing it with gender, they are categorically erasing men and women. But in the context of this, I think it's especially important to highlight that they're erasing women, because women are going to feel the brunt of this. Women are going to be the most deeply affected by this. And as you state, their capacity for... Consider the irony. On the one hand, the claim is we need to pass this bill and then ratify it through ballot question. We need to do that in order to finally bring women into parity with men. But in reality, what it's going to do is completely obliterate the opportunities for women to achieve based on their own merit in their own category.
To me, I find it really, really interesting that they always use this data set that women make less than men.
Right.
I know in our circumstance, in my own personal life, when our daughter was perhaps a thought, not quite started yet, but the one condition was that Mama could be a stay-at-home mom. And this kind of interestingly, I said, sure, right before the housing crunch, the crash of 2008. And by then, little Sammy was already here. So now all of a sudden you have no work because like the entire market tanked. But for her, she left a very good paying job in corporate America and all the benefits that came with it because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And then as different opportunities rose in a very downward economy, basically meant you had to work twice as much because you were only making half as much. Right. And she said, you do you go do whatever you got to do. Just let me stay home and take care of our little girl. They don't take that into account.
No.
Moms want to nurture some. Correct. Not all. I get that. But now it's like, they say gender fluidity or gender fluid, which a few years back, we heard that, the Constitution's fluid. Yeah. So these words all have parallels. Like if they find one that sticks and it's working a little bit in polling, they'll run with it, or they'll shift to a different direction, and take the same thing to another topic. And we see this time and time again. Like the words that we had before were one thing, but now they're not. And what they're doing, and I even within the ERA, it codifies abortion up to the date of birth. Mm-hmm. And they talk about a woman's right to health, productive, whatever they call it. What about that little boy or little girl? Mm-hmm. And we talked about this on one of the last ones. I mean, we have a fellow member who just had his wife had delivered prematurely, a 28-week little guy. Yep. And he's viable. Yep. He's thriving. Yep. More than anything. And yet they will pull that apart limb by limb, and it'll codify it within the Constitution. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. We're only to this point, we've only focused on the one angle, which is the erasure of women and men. But I think, again, it's appropriate to stress the erasure of women because they're going to take the brunt of this. They're going to be the ones most deeply affected by it. They're the ones who are going to be set back decades. I mean, this is the undoing of, literally the undoing of achievement for women since suffrage. That's what this is. There's that. And then there's what you're getting into now, which is we're going to amend the state constitution for the purpose of permanently erasing the civil rights for an entire category of human beings. That is objectively what it is. You are saying in our state constitution that human beings don't have any civil rights prior to the moment of birth. And again, as you point out, the specific example of our colleague who had a 28-week premature born son who is only 1 month old. So what's that bring it up to? 32.
Yeah.
Okay. So, would today be eligible for death if inside his mother's womb still?
Correct. So they talk about reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, what have you. And I always try to say to people, I agree, including that little one.
Yeah, that's right.
Where's their first kiss? Where's that twinkle in their eye when they meet that little, person that has that little smile or glimmer of hope, like that there could be a chance, for a date or something. We've all had those butterflies when we were young, and you are literally stripping that away from their ability to ever experience that reproductive right to that little, whether it's a boy or a girl. They don't have that opportunity. I saw a shirt a few days back that it said something to the effect of, thank goodness my mom chose life. And I grew up with a very liberal mother, a conservative father, and I've never actually said this on the house floor. I don't know if I want to say this, but I'm gonna go for it. When my parents were young, they had 2 children. He had probably a low-paying, grocery store job, if you will. And they found out had a third coming. And my very conservative father pushed my very liberal mother to have an abortion. Hard. To the point where they separated. And this is before Roe v. Wade. And while my mother was very liberal, she stood her ground. She loved her children. And all I can say is, God bless her, because I have 2 older siblings. I was the one. I've never said that because I don't want to disparage my father. My mother has passed, but it's important. My father said to me, I didn't know this till I was like 30, by the way. I had no idea. There were little things that didn't make sense, but it all kind of came out one night. But my dad said to me years before that, you're young in your 20s and they don't have hardly 2 nickels to rub together. And I had something that was worth value and I was contemplating selling it. And it was kind of a rare collective item, if you will. And he told me, he was trying to talk me out of it. And he said, it's one thing to say that you once had something. It's another thing to say that you still do. Which tied into when I found all this out. I shared that story with Andrea Rao, I believe, MCCL. She used to be the head of Minnesota Concerned Citizens for Life. And again, I've listened to the abortion debate on the floor for several years now. And I've thought about sharing it, but out of respect for my father, I've chosen not to. And then Representative Kelly Morrison, she was in the House. She's now a senator, and she's now been endorsed for U.S. Congress. She was the one that delivered my daughter. Put all that together, because I sat there in my first term listening to her advocate for abortion rights, for it. And she is the one that was standing in that room with myself. And, it's the first time I ever did this, right? But she was the one that delivered my daughter. And she's advocating to eliminate that kind of moment.
You just have the one kid?
Yeah. My little girl.
So, this is the thing that gets me about this question of reproductive rights, quote unquote, is it requires, in order to be for certainly the status quo in the state of Minnesota and for the extreme pro-death position that this deceptively named Equal Rights Amendment carves out. In order to be for that, you have to willfully narrow your view to just the short-term fear of the mother. And that's your only consideration. You're not taking into consideration the branch of the family tree that is being pruned and all of the subsequent branches that are going along with it. Your daughter, her future children, their future children. I mean, there's a whole, a fresh tree that is being preemptively pruned every single time we do this, and we do it tens of thousands of times a year.
Yeah, and so where this gets even a little more interesting, my mother's, I believe it's great-grandmother, she was a Cherokee in, I believe, Missouri. And at a young age, 12-ish, I wish I could call her and ask her, because she was the one that really knew all this lineage. She was kidnapped and raped by an Irish man way back in time. And she ultimately had that child, which then led to my mother eventually. And so, yeah, not a great moment, not something to celebrate, but was it the kid's fault?
Right.
And you know, I'm not going to judge those in that scenario by any means.
Right.
But at the same time, out of something really bad, and I'm not saying I'm good, but I'm not trying to but I look at my mother, I look at her cousins that were in the same lineage of that generation, and all the stuff that they've done for so many, and all of that could have been erased.
Right.
And all their kids, which would be my generation, and then now we all have kids.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, do you only have one child? Biologically, yes. When I met Angela, she had a 12-year-old son, and his name is Andrew. And him and I are, I don't know, we get along really well. The opportunity to tutor him, help him at times of need, and now I watch him be protective over his little sister, which technically is a half sister. He doesn't see it that way. I don't see it that way. And you know, it's, but you look at all the good that can be done, but all that could have been wiped out if back in, I don't know, I suppose 1800, if somewhere in the 1800s when this all went down, if that would have been an option or a thought to eliminate. And then not only that, you know, you talked about the death of all these little people. I find it interesting that maybe we discussed this in a previous episode, but when I was little, there was this big anti-hunting of the harp seal because it was so bad.
Yeah.
And we had to do everything we can to protect them. And yet, here we find ourselves in the same thing for all kinds of little four-legged furry creatures. We got to do everything.
The Kristi Noem outrage.
I still don't understand why the hell she permitted that, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But yes, 14-month-old puppy. Well, just frustrated. And apparently it happened years ago. I don't know the circumstances of it, but why you'd even repeat it is beyond me. 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago, my neighbor had called me because there was a little fawn caught up in a wire fence. And I have pictures on my phone to this day. And it was about a little bit later than this time of year. And I had just put all my campaign stuff in the back of my truck. So my zip ties, my side cutter to cut the zip ties. And I literally jumped in my truck and just went. And I put it in the night before. The side cutters were what were key because this thing was all wrapped up by his back leg. And it's just a tiny little thing. But so we'll do everything we can for anything else. Mm-hmm. But we'll pull it limb by limb apart.
Mm-hmm. Our own children.
Our own little ones.
Yeah. And
that goes back to Representative Engen when this little guy just popped out like out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And he catches it. Mm-hmm. And it was like 3-some pounds, high 3 pounds, mm-hmm. which is as tiny. My daughter was 6 or 7 pounds, something, 21 inches. But this thing at, 11 weeks early, mm-hmm. give or take, and thriving. It just, I don't know. To me, it's mind-blowing. We're obviously, the other side of this debate, they're going to be stuck their way. We're stuck our way. I hope that we can reach people and show that, or get them to, think about these lives have value.
Right.
My niece was very premature. I remember my brother, he would hold her in his hand, and her head would be right about his fingers, and then her basically body was pretty much his palm, and then her 2 little legs would drop over his wrist. She was tiny, probably about the same size as Elliot's son, but just a tiny little button. And now I look at her, and she's a, fully grown woman, but with children, and think of those 2 children. And her children are going to start driving now. So it's like this progression of, lineage, and that's what you're talking about, because we keep pruning the branches that create the seeds that create the next chapter.
It just occurred to me. ERA. Those are the first 3 letters of the word ERAsure. This is the ERAsure Amendment, and that's how I'm going to refer to it from now on, because that's what it does. It erases women. It erases unborn children. It doesn't just erase them physically. It erases them conceptually. It says, you aren't worthy of acknowledging as a concept. We're not even going to think about you. We're going to proceed as if you don't exist. That's what this amendment does.
Sadly, yes. And not only that, you look at, I've had this conversation with some people. So we had the abortion debate last year. Passionate, long, because it just literally wipes out many young people from ever having their rights to reproductive rights because they don't get to experience anything. Then we have this transgender movement, and what's happening? We're giving drugs to young boys and girls so they become sterile. Now you're wiping out another branch via a narrative to accommodate their feelings. And you look at all the hurdles they put so they can obtain their free college that was passed, because now they're flooding all this fentanyl across the southern border. So if you make it past the abortion, you may or may not make it past the sterilization, depending. If you make it past that, you got to get past all the fentanyl and all the illegal aliens doing. We see this in the news constantly. People being attacked. So if you make it past that, how many hurdles do you have to have in those growing up years? When I was young, you get to a point where you think you're kind of beyond that age of where you're safe and your kidnapping's not a thing anymore. And then the Jacob Wetterling thing happened back then. And it actually put kind of a fear in my little group of friends. Like, we're not actually past that point. And we're probably, 12, 14 years old, 15, somewhere in there. And so you realize that there is no time frame where somebody can do something really bad. And we see the lack of prosecution on many county attorneys for violent criminals. They keep getting let loose and they do it again. So you have a lot of hurdles to get through to then, get to the point where you can take off and launch your life, if you will. And it's sad.
It is that. Who doesn't have hurdles, though, despite being a charged felon, credibly accused of burglarizing her own mother, is Senator Mitchell, who this past Tuesday, had her long-awaited Senate Ethics Committee hearing. And I gotta say, you and I were on a space recently, Twitter space, with Senator Eric Lucero, who was one of the two senators, the other one being Karen Housley, who presented the minority's case against Senator Mitchell on Tuesday. And I was expressing my just befuddlement at how clownish Senate President Bobby Joe Champion was as the chair of this ethics committee. I mean, it was embarrassing. The way that he was conducting himself, like a low-rent version of Johnny Cochran. And Lucero's comment was, that's just how he is. That's how he runs the Senate. That's how he takes lunch. That's just who he is this kind of buffoonish, low-rent Johnny Cochran type. And the fact that that's literally who they pick to lead themselves as Democrats it makes me ashamed that we've allowed that to happen as a state, that we've allowed such unqualified, totally corrupt, clownish people to be in charge of our legislature. It stands as a point of shame for our state.
And then that goes to the entire legislature.
Yeah.
There are 201 of us between Senate members and House members. 134 in the House, 67 in the Senate, half as many. They have a 104-seat majority out of 201. So they literally, it's not like they have it in a landslide, if you will. And they don't care. Their voice. He scolded the other member of the ethics committee, one of them being Senator Matthews, scolded him upon his opening comments, saying he's grandstanding.
Right.
For those that don't know, Senator Matthews said, the one thing I could never accuse him of is grandstanding. He's about the most monotone, to the point, just direct. He has no deflection in his voice. This is not who he is.
Well, and he was literally just listing objective facts. That's all he was doing.
But then he chose to, not only that, he went after the other Republican member, which is Senator Jeremy Miller, and proceeded to tell him over and over again, obviously you're not a lawyer. Scolded him that he's not a lawyer. He was co-counsel for Senator Mitchell's attorney, is what he was.
Yes.
And at no cost to her.
Right.
Because that one vote majority, and for those that don't understand, literally the Senate has a one vote majority. She has been voting on bills, including
gun control,
the binary trigger bill, and straw purchase, which they combine two things together that conflict with one another. But it doesn't conflict. It's that there's a lot of members that would have voted for this enhanced penalty for straw purchases, but because they put the other part in there, some felt they couldn't, some felt they had to. And so she votes as a person charged with a first-degree felony burglary because she was found laying in her stepmother's bedroom dressed in all black. And she's voting to make to enact a law to make law-abiding citizens an automatic felon. If people do not see a cause of concern there, that she is the one and only vote. If she did not vote, if she was not allowed to vote, everything would be a 33-33. Anything on a tie dies. they have to have 34 votes for it to pass.
Yeah.
Even if there were, I don't know if you knew this, but if they had 3 members that were absent, so it'd be, 32. 33 will not pass a bill in the Senate. They have to hit 34. Doesn't matter. It's not 50% plus 1 of what's available.
It's 50% of the entire body.
It has to be 34.
Yeah.
No matter how many are present.
Right.
So that's a really interesting thing in the House. It's got to be, if we're short, on both sides of the aisle, if we're short equally 4 members on both sides, it's 50% plus 1.
Right.
The bill crosses the hurdle. But in the Senate, they have to hit the 34 mark, no matter how many are present.
Right.
So by her voting, and she's even voted against motions that would expel her from the Senate. She's
not recused herself from matters that directly impact her.
Correct. I think she's going to, she's a licensed bar attorney, so I'm expecting she'll petition the judge to be one of the jurors. Because you only need one hung juror to throw something out.
Yeah, so...
I mean, come on, think about it. You might as well go there, right?
For people who didn't see the hearing, let's run through what happened quickly. So, Housley and Lucero, the senators on the Republican side presenting the case against Mitchell, present their case. And all they do is they just point to everything we know, right? Like all the media reports, the criminal complaint, she was caught red-handed. And by the way, the case that they're making is not we, the Senate, should throw her in a cage, which requires proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's not the case that they're making. The case that they're making is her conduct does not uphold the highest ethical standards, which is what our Senate rules say we as a body must do.
Correct.
Right? And so what's the approach of the lawyer and the approach of Bobby Joe Champion? It's to, after Bobby Joe Champion spends a solid half hour making it clear that this isn't a courtroom and we're not the ones who determine innocence and guilt and what have you, turns around and allows Mitchell's lawyer and engages himself in trying to, in an adversarial, judicial way, tear apart our senators, tear apart Lucero and Housley and their credibility, and what do you guys really know and how do you know it? And it's like, these aren't our claims. These are media reports. This is a criminal complaint. These are findings of fact. This is a probable cause statement from authorities. My credibility is immaterial. You could have a monkey sit here and push it across the table to you. It'd still be just as true, right? And so I felt kind of like that took our people off guard a little bit, which was unfortunate. But it was just so disingenuous and clownish to watch because they had just gotten done having a complaint heard against Senator Glenn Gruenhagen, which was completely frivolous and not even worth going into the substance of. But there was no claim on that side at all that we can't possibly know the facts related to this complaint unless they are adjudicated through some sort of criminal or civil judicial process. And only then will we know what has actually happened and have any facts to determine whether or not this conduct went against our own Senate rules.
Correct. And you and I were talking that day because everybody was pretty much watching it. We were on the floor. And I mean, I think everybody pretty much was, being that we're in the House chamber, we were all watching it either on our phones or laptops or what have you. I mean, watching what was going on in the Senate Ethics Committee because it's a pretty big thing. And they tried to make it out like, well, we have to wait until this legal process plays out. So, which, probably likely will be the better part of a year or a whole year, whatever, or more. But we can't do anything until then. In that case. But we can do it on Senator Gruenhagen's case where there is no court proceeding. Mm-hmm. But the whole point of having an ethics committee is to protect the integrity of public trust in an institution of the state Senate. Does not matter if she's found guilty or not guilty going forward. That has nothing to do with it. It's the integrity of the public's trust for the institution. And because they're saying we have to wait till this whole thing plays out between the arraignment, the omnibus hearing, the pretrial, jury selection, and then all of whatever that all leads to. Obviously, many months down the road. In the meantime, we're going to let her vote. But so there's really no point having an ethics committee. Because the point of it is, if it was a teacher, if it was a law enforcement officer, if it was any other occupation out there, it would be suspended with pay at the very least.
Yep.
And they would be removed from their official capacity and not allowed to participate, pending the outcome of what is learned. They're not interested in learning anything. They're not interested in what they even argued not only the Tom Hauser's interview with the stepmother, the statements that were made in the police report that were published, and argue like, well, did she really say that, or did she say that under duress? I mean, like they're creating like deflection on every possible thing. Well, this is what was put out there. This is the 911 call, and then he even went so far going in the 911 call. You think about it. You wake up in the middle of the night. You're 74 years old. You're alone, for a little over a year now because your husband that you've been married to for 40 plus years passed away. And something wakes you up in the middle of the night. It's like 4:30ish probably in the morning because I think the phone call came in at 4:45 to 911. And she repeatedly stated that I tripped over a male, however it was worded.
She used the pronoun he.
Well, he. He, and there's a guy or somebody in my house.
There's a man in my house.
A man in my house. Because the furthest thing from her thought would be her stepdaughter, right? Yeah. But he focused on that she could be completely wrong. It may not even be Senator Mitchell. Even though the police found her in the basement.
Well, and that's just it, is how absurd is the scenario that you're painting there? So you're not contesting that there was somebody in the bedroom. You're putting forth the possibility that it was somebody other than Mitchell. Even though Mitchell was found in the house, wearing dark clothes, in possession of stolen property, with tools of burglary, that there was some other person who actually did it, and she just coincidentally
happened to be in the basement.
Right. It's absurd. Again, it's buffoonish. It's clownish. It's embarrassing. It's unbecoming the dignity of the Senate to even propose such a ludicrous idea. And I think here is kind of like the nail in the coffin, and I really wish somebody would have made this point during the hearing. If Senator Mitchell, like you're raising all these questions that attack the credibility of the authorities that arrested her and prosecuted her, the media, you're saying the media is getting it wrong. You're undermining everybody, saying they're wrong and she's right. Senator Mitchell can prove that, and she's the only person on the face of the earth who has the ability to prove that right now, this moment, today. Release the body cam footage. Yep. Release the body cam footage, and then we'll all see the one-armed man for ourselves, right? Then we'll all see that she never said, I'm not really good at this, and I know I did a bad thing. Then we'll know that she was caringly checking on the welfare of her dementia-riddled stepmother, who we've now discovered was only recently diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, which by no means puts you in a position where you can't take care of yourself.
I don't know if it's out there. I haven't found it. I would like to hear the recording, the actual audio of that call. If you've ever had a family member that goes through the Alzheimer's or dementia, I guess everybody has now because we have a president, but couldn't help myself on that one. But there's good and bad days. There's clearly things that you have to go, what did you just say? Because it doesn't, they're mentally all over the board. Some days it can be totally fine. Some days you're doing your best to try to keep up with wherever the heck they're going. And the actual audio recording would be interesting to hear, to see if she was, oatmeal for brains, like is how Mitchell's trying to point it out, that she was so concerned about her welfare of her stepmother. If she's clear and concise, but just even reading through the printed transcript, it doesn't sound like this 74-year-old Carol is all over the board. She's pretty precise, other than, she's thinking it's a male, because who typically breaks in your house is typically men, all dressed in black with a black hoodie on and a black sock over a flashlight, and you trip over a body to get to safety, then there's somebody in your home. I mean, and she didn't go home for a week after that. She stayed in a hotel because that's how afraid she was. So this really impacted her. So if you were like really, really rattled with or inflicted with Alzheimer's or dementia, you wouldn't even be, you might be afraid today, but tomorrow you may not even remember it.
Mm-hmm.
But she was too afraid to go home for a whole week.
Right.
So she's clearly cognitive and was very concerned. I think I did hear that the local police department sent a couple officers. They went and swept the entire house to give her the assurance there's nobody in your house. And my understanding is they also went through and double secured like the basement windows. Windows of egress that where somebody could get in, made it to the point. So I don't know if they brought in their little battery operated screw guns or what have you and put boards on them. They're not a point of egress, like for safety or whatever. But it sounded like that to me, like they literally reinforced her house to give her assurance she could be there and not be fearful.
Well, because Nicole's on the street.
Not only on the street, but she's voting on laws to make you and I, lawful, law-abiding citizens, a felon because we may or may not possess something that they don't like.
Yeah.
And the irony of that is amazing.
All right, so
it's 82 today, so the pollen is great.
Trump had a ridiculous rally in New Jersey.
Yes, he did.
Ridiculous. And New Jersey is not known as a red state.
The conservative bastion of the nation, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't exactly fall into that category.
It's funny because on the way over here, I was listening to, and I don't always do this, the Saturday edition of Morning Wire, which is the morning program that the Daily Wire puts out. And I can't remember the name of the gal, but you would recognize it likely if I said it. Batya, I think is her first name. She's a opinion editor for Newsweek, if I'm getting it right. And she's kind of stood out as being somebody who, despite the fact that she's in the mainstream media, kind of plays it down the middle. I'm sure there's plenty of her own colleagues who think that she's like a rabid MAGA hat wearing conservative simply because she's willing to talk to the other side. But she's got a book out, and it's something to the effect of Second Class. Second Class is the title, and then the subtitle is something like, the forgotten generation and how they've been betrayed by the elites and what have you. And listening to her interview, and I obviously didn't get through the whole thing on the way here, but I got through part of it. She makes the point that, we've made this point on the floor. It's the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, right? Well, what happened to farmer and labor? Like, they're passing all these laws that make it harder to be a farmer and that make it harder to be a laborer.
Or actually eliminates the ability to be a farmer.
Yeah.
But actually, you can be a farmer if you sign up to put solar panels on your land, and then you can grow renewable power and be paid handsomely at about 4 times the amount you could possibly, on the best year of a generational farmer, could ever possibly make.
Right.
But in exchange, you will sign away that fruitful agricultural land for what is technically, I have a contract in my vehicle right now, up to 62 years. Because it's 25 years. There's a 2 and a 5 year in the front side, then a 25-year run, and then there's 3 10-year extensions up to the 2 parties interested. Most of the landowners that I know that have gotten into this, probably in their mid-60s, they're likely not going to see the end of the first 32-year run. So those 10-year extensions will come down to somebody, another lineage of their family. And why would you get out of it if you're guaranteed this significant amount of money and you don't have to own any equipment? You don't have to buy any seed. You don't have to buy any fertilizer, pesticide. You don't have to have crop insurance. You don't actually have to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Because the government is bribing you out of getting up in the morning and convincing you like you don't need to work.
Right.
So and there's so much land being consumed by this, and it's only agricultural land that they're targeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But to your point, though, the Trump rally, initially it was reported that he sold out this or filled this auditorium, 80,000. And then as the day progressed, the overflow crowd exceeded 120. Over 100,000 people in the hyper-conservative bastion of states, New Jersey, showed up to see this political figure.
Yeah. Well, and again, the question becomes why. And the why that was explored in this interview is the new Democrat coalition. You know, it used to be the coalition, you know, of farmers and laborers and like the little guy and what have you. Now what we have is a new coalition between the very, very elite, like the people who are churned out of these big name universities and who go on to work in journalism and go on to work in government and bureaucracy and become judges and all these things. The very tippity top of the high class, that's one part of the coalition. And the other part is the indigent poor, like people who benefit from and will never escape government programs. That's their coalition. And what lies between those two? Us, the middle class.
All of us.
We're the ones who fund it. We're the ones who, through inflation and the printing of money and the reckless government spending, it benefits the very tippity top rich because they're the first ones who get their hands on that counterfeit cash, that fiat currency. And so they get full value for it as they exchange it, as they loan it out. And then by the time it gets down to us, it and what we already had is reduced in value. It takes more to buy something today than it did yesterday. And then, of course, the people at the very bottom, they're worse off as well, but they've managed to construct this political narrative where they never connect the dots between what's actually causing them to be stuck in this rut. And it's not these people over here who are actually pulling the strings and printing the money and putting forward the policy. It's these people here who don't look like you. Right?
Right.
It's Whitey in the middle who's somehow making your life more difficult and depriving you of resources, and don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain, who's, by the way, is your political ally who tells you they're for you. But you never question why your life doesn't actually get any better.
Which kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. So growing up, my mother having this Native American background, she constantly talked about the plight of the Native Americans on the reservation when I was very young. You know, they were given, the federal government was given this pittance of a check every month. And that was how they survived. Fast forward back in the probably late 80s, they started with bingo halls, and then became bingo and blackjack, and then slowly became bingo, blackjack, and slot machines or one-armed bandits, whatever. And you saw this progression because they realized they're a sovereign nation; they can fight their way out of this. There was, I remember, because Minnesota was actually some of the tribal land here was some of the forefront of all that, particularly the Metaquac Sioux. But there was a reservation down in Arizona where the feds went in and confiscated all of their gaming machines, like loaded them on semis and took them. And they eventually got them back through the court battles. But the point is, they fought their way out of this heavily oppressed thing that the government did to them. Mm-hmm. To keep them, you just stay in your little spot. Mm-hmm. And I see parallels in this. You stay in your little spot. You don't make any noise, and we'll give you enough to get by. Is it any different for the group that they give them? Whether it's EBT, whether it's welfare, Section 8, we'll give you enough to get by. Just stay in your spot and shut up.
Yeah,
I see it the same way, and it's not the color of the person, it's not the race of the person, the gender of the person, it's not any of that. They don't care. Just be simple, be stupid, and don't make any noise. We will take care of you. You just make sure that you don't make any noise against us. That's all it is.
Yeah. And so Trump represents a threat to all of that. Because, and granted, is he an intellectual threat to it? Not consistently. When he was in office, was he a true administrative threat to it? Incontiguously, yes. Off and on, he was. But what he definitely is he's a rhetorical threat to it. And with him in power, it paves the way for those in his orbit who are more consistent intellectual and administrative threats to the status quo to do their damage. And when I listen to people like the sorts of folks that Charlie Kirk has on his podcast, many of whom worked under Trump during the first term, they learned their lessons about how the swamp functions in that first term. From day one, they were on their heels because of the lawfare and the media conspiring with the Russia hoax and all of that nonsense. And so it was difficult to get their feet underneath them and to really push back in the way that needed to be done. But they've had a couple of years to think about it.
They had a 4-year break.
Yep.
They know exactly where. So the way I look at this, you just started last year, when you were elected.
Yeah.
Prior to that, in the last 2 weeks of 2022, we were finally allowed to meet in full body.
Yeah.
And not be, only 12 were allowed on the floor. And then everybody else was remote. But there was big fences around our capital, their state capital, as well as the U.S. Capitol, and many other liberal state capitals had these fences and security. In that 2 weeks, one of the most interesting things I found was we could have people come into our office, but only on certain days of the week because COVID was so bad, right? Some days apparently it was, some days it wasn't. I mean, and I know it sounds funny, but that was literally what it was. On Mondays, no, or whichever it was, and then Tuesdays, yes, and Thursdays, yes. I mean, it was an odd schedule where people could come in and meet their representative. I'm on the second floor. The second floor is 100% Republican. Mm-hmm. Third floor is 50-50. Mm-hmm. Fourth floor is 100% Democrat. Mm-hmm. In that 2 week period, I went up to go talk to a representative on the third floor. You come out of the elevators or the stairwell. It's like a lobby area. You can go either way, and it's just a big oval all the way around it. But there's doors, and they installed card swipe security on those doors so that unless you're a member or staff, you can't get through them, which never was the case prior to COVID. But either side you go to, there's a desk right there. And typically on that desk is nothing more than a map of where the layout of that floor and whose office is where and which way to go. So I go up there in 2022 in the last 2 weeks, and there's an armed security guard once I open the door. I've never seen that. Ever. I've never seen anybody sit at the damn desk, to be honest, but it's an armed guard. So I open the door and I look at him. I'm like, oh, crap, I forgot something. Walk straight through the lobby back the other way. Open up that door, and there's an armed security guard. And I said the same thing. Oh, crap, I forgot something. Because now I'm going, why is there an armed security guard on both sides, whichever way you want to go, because it's just a big rectangle. So I went up to the fourth floor. Armed security guard on both sides. No armed security guard on floor 2.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere there's a Democrat, there's an armed security guard. What that told me was they weren't afraid of COVID.
Kids.
They were afraid of the person that has lost everything and has nothing left to lose.
Right.
Because they destroyed so many people.
Mm-hmm.
They took away their business. They took away their house because so many people in the beginning, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, they didn't want to lose their employees. They didn't want their employees to suffer. A lot of them took out second mortgages.
Yeah.
So they lost their house. And many of them lost their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you put that kind of pressure, financial pressure, sometimes the nuclear family kind of has a challenge. What we have now, in my opinion, the exact same thing in reverse. They have everything to lose. And they are not going to give up easily. The next 6 months are going to be one of the coolest, bumpiest rides we've ever seen. History books are going to write themselves. And it's the greatest time to be alive. Watch how far they'll push it. Because every day we're going to see something going, yeah, didn't see that one coming. But they know that, as you said, the Trump administration learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And they've had 4 years to figure it out. Who are the bad actors? Where are they? In what bureaucracy? Think of all these people who are potentially, if they don't survive this, if the Trump administration wins, their jobs could be over. And could it even go further? And it could be prosecution for illegal activities.
I think it should. I think it should be.
So they have so much to lose.
Right.
And this middle management of all these bureaucracies, whether it's the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health and Human Services, I don't care, Department of Education, for all the stuff they're doing to children, you pick it. There is, February, there was a report that came out. Historic, I should say. The largest month in nation's history of new hires in state and federal government. They broke 70,000 in 1 month, the month of February 2024. You look at it, and what are the numbers you see? You sit in your committees. The number I typically see, on the lowest number I see for a full-time equivalent employee is 140,000. Now, yes, that factors in their office space, which they don't actually ever use because they all work remote, and their taxes and all the benefit package, whatever. But 140, I can go drive around my district and find probably 80%, 85% that don't even come close to $100,000 a year individually. These people are being given these amazing paying jobs with amazing benefits. What do you think they're going to vote for going forward? What do you think? What policy do you think they're going to support going forward?
Of course, it's all unsustainable though, because all of those FTEs, all those people making $120,000, $140,000 a year, are making it off the backs of those people you're driving by in your district who are making less than $100,000. That's where the money's coming from.
Right.
That's why I say both of these groups are actually the same group, right? They are people who are living off the value produced by these folks in the middle.
Correct.
And that's who Trump represents. And so here's potentially where I think we might end it today, and looking ahead to Trump coming to town this week. Next time we talk here, he'll have come and gone. Let's say he wins. Let's say we have the red wave that we were expecting in 22 and didn't get. Let's say, because I saw a tweet from Tom Emmer recently where he said when we would take back the White House and flip the Senate and expanded our majority in the House, we're finally going to, clean house with the administrative state and drain the swamp, or however it is that he put it. Fantastic. That's exactly what you should do. If they don't actually deliver, this is my biggest fear. My biggest fear is not that we're going to lose in November. My biggest fear is we're going to win huge and nothing changes.
Either way, change is going to come, in my opinion. it's no different than the argument for the Convention of States. Don't change it, abide by it. Okay, that hasn't worked for decades. If there is a temperament and a passion building amongst all these people you describe in the middle. It's a huge embodiment of people. The whole COVID, the vaccine mandates, the loved ones locked away in a hospital, they couldn't see them before they passed away. All of this stuff and losing their livelihood has pushed people to a very volatile point. No matter what happens, eventually something's going to happen because people have a breaking point. And I think that is coming sooner than not. If there's not a reaction, if you look back at historically with like a Convention of States, typically the Congress would react if they realized they were about to lose their control over what's going to happen versus allowing the states to do it. And they would just give them whatever it was they wanted, probably water it down a little bit, but at least give them enough satisfaction they'd back off and go back to work and just go about their business. But there's going to be a breaking point if the right thing doesn't happen. I think I agree. I think there's going to be a historic number of voters out there on both sides. That's why we just brought 12 million illegal aliens in. So, everybody that signs up for a license that's illegal can get one in our state. And we're not the only state that passed it last year. Plus, you're automatically registered to vote when you sign up for a license. Your 16-year-old child or mine,
right? You're
automatically registered to vote, and you trigger, once you turn 18. But they may be beyond 18. So we have all that. The last thing I do want to bring up, because I mentioned this, I texted you this earlier, gopher. This is kind of something I have a gopher problem in my yard. And I have one that's I feel like I'm in Caddyshack. I'm stuck in the movie. I have this one that is very elusive. And he's really smart. So when you get the big pile of dirt in your beautiful, pristine yard, which mine's not, it's kind of mowed weeds, but nevertheless, bumps are bad. And you dig down and you'll find a Y. The interesting thing is gophers do not like light. They hate light. So they'll come and they'll plug those tunnels back up because they don't want light. For whatever reason. I guess transparency is not a thing, but we are considered the gopher state. I thought about that yesterday when I was chasing. My fingernails are full of dirt from chasing this one or two gophers, but they hate light. And we are the gopher state. Minnesota Gophers. We have gophers embedded throughout our capital and through our state office building within all the architecture. Our college team is the Minnesota Gophers. So it's interesting that and just thinking about this because obviously you live in the realm of politics. You think about things in a different way while you're down on your knees and you're digging out those tunnels and trying to open them back up because they pack them full to block off the light. They hate light. And we are the gopher state. And we have Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. And I don't know. They don't like transparency.
They certainly don't want people to be have a meaningful say in outcomes. We saw that with the flag that was planted yesterday on Statehood Day.
Yep.
Our new Minnesota state flag, which 13 people like. And that's probably about it. It's amazing to me the whole rationale for why we needed to change the flag was that it wasn't representative of everyone and that there was a certain segment of people who felt like they weren't being represented by the old state flag. And so what do? They change it through a process that pisses off half the state.
7 out of 10 is the local liberal media. In their polling, 7 out of 10 do not like that flag.
There you go.
70%.
So, and they imply it through a lot of the things they say. I will explicitly say it. That's the point. That's what they wanted. The reason why you had a little 20-second video put out by Governor Walz yesterday where he makes a point out of giggling and laughing as he takes the old flag away and puts the new flag behind him. That is the point. They want to rub your nose in it and put it in your face that you are ours now. All your base belong to us. That's the message from the Minnesota Democrats, is that we're in charge. You're not. We're going to take the things that you care about, the things that your fathers and great-grandfathers and grandfathers fought and died for, literally the flags that they bled under. We're going to take that away from you, and we're going to put up our silly, Canva project that we spent half an hour on.
It actually looks like, I wish, I don't know if you could edit one into this. It looks like a pack of Marlboros.
A pack of Marlboros.
It's got the big, dark blue K.
I mean,
It literally is the pack of Marlboros. Like, if you would get Marlboro menthol, it would be green, not this like light blue and dark blue, but maybe there's a peppermint version that Marlboro can come out with for us so we could actually mimic it. And instead of having the seal in the bigger part, we'll just move it to the K part, which is where they put the 8-point star.
Yeah.
Because that's literally what it is. It is dead on to a pack of Marlboros.
I mean, we're banning all flavored tobacco at the same time. Yeah.
So we can't have things that influence young minds, like flavored tobacco, vaping, marijuana, all that kind of stuff, chewing tobacco. But we can legalize marijuana. We can turn our flag into a pack of Marlboros sideways.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. It's like, where are you all coming from? And people, we don't care that 7 out of 10 don't like it. Mm-hmm. Because out of 201 legislators, we have 104 on our side. So
that's right.
The 104 is all that matters.
That's right.
Screw you all.
Yes. That is their attitude. And, you just got done talking about elections and the funky things that are going on there. To what extent is that the underlying cause of their hubris? That they feel like they're untouchable because they've got this thing locked down and they don't believe you can toss them out, that you don't have the wherewithal or the capacity, or that they've just mucked things up so much electorally that it's operationally impossible to get 50% plus one and oust them. Now, I don't believe that's the case. I think we can defeat them. I think their system does have limitations, even after the changes that they've made this year. And that if conservatives and normies step up, we can.
Independents,
yep. We can flip things in this state. It is possible. Obviously, the Trump administration or the Trump campaign believes that as well. Of that, otherwise he wouldn't be coming here this Friday. And there's polling to back that up. But I feel like they are so in love with the smell of their own farts that
great way of saying it.
Seriously, they're so arrogant that they really don't feel any. I mean, I saw it on the House floor this past Thursday when I got up to speak on the flag. We gave them the opportunity to put it to a vote of the people. Just oh man, I wish I should wear a GoPro on my head when I get up to give floor speeches, engage in floor debate, because you should see the faces of these ghouls in response to the things that I have to say.
Well, those that make faces or those that don't even look at you once. Mm-hmm. I mean, my vantage point from the floor, I mean, I can see everybody. Where you sit, you can't see the people on the other side of the rostrum. But the vast majority of them are literally like, looking at a phone or looking at the computer. They never pay an ounce attention to many things. I mean, there's been a few recently floor speeches. Representative Nash, when he talked about his abusive childhood, or when he was abused as a child, I should say. And then Representative Harder, who sits next to me out of nowhere last week, when she talked about I don't think anybody knew that was coming, that she just all of a sudden got fired up, and she's not comfortable typically speaking on the floor. And a very passionate, abusive story where she was violated. And I don't know where all that came from, but what I did notice was everybody was paying attention to her at that moment, or the vast majority of the other side. But for the most part, they don't really care what you say. They don't even listen to you. And if they do, they snicker. Because I used to sit very close to where you sit on the floor. I was actually in Elliot's desk. And I had a back and forth, and must have been 19 or 20. And I literally had Representative Long, Jimmy Long, and Zach Stevenson literally like snickering at me, like actively like bouncing, laughing, like mocking me, thinking they were going to knock me off my mental spot, which only pissed me off even more.
Well, I mean, I sincerely do not take it personally.
No.
Because it's not me who they're reacting that way to. It's the people who I represent. And by that, I don't just mean my 43,000 constituents. I mean people across the state and indeed around the nation who think like we think and feel how we feel and share our values. It's again, those people in the middle, those people who are being forgotten and intentionally provoked and having their future stolen. Those are the people who are getting snickered at and having eyes rolled at them and being the subject of Democrat mockery, because that's how they feel about you. That's sincerely how they feel about you. And so I don't take it personally. I take it as confirmation that I'm standing in a position of righteousness against people who need to be defeated because they hate American normal people.
Correct. And something you just said, and we should probably wrap this up pretty quick. I don't know how long we're into this, but
yeah.
You did it. I did it. We've done it 3 times now. You took an oath to the United States Constitution. You also took one basically to the state of Minnesota Constitution. Who is it that is not your constituent? And that you just said it, because it's not just for your 43,000.
Right.
It's all Minnesotans.
Right.
And then beyond that, it's all Americans.
That's right.
Citizens. And that is what I advocate constantly when I talk to people from around the country, or when people say, like, I call my representative or a representative from my state, but they say that I'm not their constituent. But my constituent or my representative won't talk to me because we're opposite politically. So I try to call one nearby, and I'm like, hey, the way I look at it, that oath is that oath. We're all in this together.
Right.
So that's probably a pretty good spot to wrap this one up.
Yep.
And I think you nailed it well on that part, that we're all in this together. We can win this.
We can.
It's ours to lose.
That's right.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Giddy up.
All right. We'll see you next week.
The Hudson-Mekeland Podcast, with hosts and Minnesota State Representatives Walter Hudson and Shane Mekeland. Follow, subscribe, like, and share to show your support. On X, find Walter at Walter Hudson and Shane at Shane Mekeland, spelled Mekeland.